Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Cakes from Junkies on 106.7 The Fan, and I'm joining my pals on Ref the District.
Here we go.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Ref the Districts. The Capitals season is coming to a close, and it's just not been what we wanted it to be. The great chase was excellent, and it was always fun watching him creep up that ladder, Stoner. But unfortunately, it comes at a season where it was for naught. What are your feelings on the season so far?
I don't know.
Your initial reaction to the season ending.
I don't know what to do with my spring. I'm so used to having the Caps in this sweat of a playoff push in the spring, in the early to mid-spring. I don't know what I'm going to do. Of course, you don't have the Wizards, but you rarely ever have the Wizards. But now you also don't have – you could always count on the Caps to give you a sweat.
To bridge that gap. Yeah.
And this year, nothing. Just a big dud of a season.
Yeah, it really is a bit of a big dud to the season, but not a big dud is our guest for today. It is Cakes from the Junkies. We appreciate you coming on. We know that it's been a rough start of the week for you, about as rough as a season has been for the Capitals. Has there been anything outside of Auville's chase for the great eight, the great eight, right? The 800 goals and everything. Has there been anything else from this season that you've appreciated or liked?
First of all, I want to echo Stoner's comments that I don't know what I'm going to do with myself the first couple of weeks during the playoffs. I mean, look, even since the Caps won the Stanley Cup and the playoff runs were short with first round exits, haven't won a playoff series since winning the Stanley Cup, you still could grasp and wrap your arms around it and enjoy playoff hockey. For me, it's like there is no playoff hockey now if the Caps aren't involved. I'm not going to watch the rest of the gross teams of the East.
Who cares?
Yeah, who cares? I'm a Caps guy. You guys are Caps guys, and it's a void, man. Like the Caps going to the playoffs, especially of late, has been like a birthright. 15 of 16 seasons, and now for it to just fall flat, and now we have to get hyped up for being in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. We have a 5% sweat at landing the top player. I mean, I guess that's semi-exciting. The only other real takeaway from the season I thought that was impressive and fun was what Dylan Strome did. I mean, Dylan Strome was a guy that McClellan signed shrewdly on a 1-year deal. I think he made like $3 or $3.5 million this year. He wound up with a career high in points. Now, it was again for a lost season, kind of a rudderless ship type of season, but he got re-inked to a long-term deal. So I like the fact that you add a young piece in him. The Ovi goal chase is fun, but I mean, I'm sure I echo the thoughts of Ovi, and like he's over like individual accolades. He's going to break Gretzky's record. He knows he's going to break the record. It's not an if, it's just a when. That will happen. Like, but he sees his window closing. Like there's not that much time left. There's not that much sand left in his hourglass as far as his NHL career. And he doesn't want to just be chasing goals for the next two plus 3 seasons, however much longer he plays. He wants to be on a team that can contend and has a chance to win another Stanley Cup. And with each passing season, with either a first round playoff exit or no playoffs like this year, he realizes he doesn't have that many more bites at the apple. Like he's got to, they have to retool on the fly and put a decent roster around him for the next 2 seasons, or else it will just evolve into, well, Ovi's going to score another 38 or 40 or 45 goals this year, depending on how many games he plays. Like the Caps fans, I think they're over that for the most part. Like most Caps fans that I know, they want them to be making deep playoff runs.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care that much about the Ovi winning the goal scoring title. Like ED on the show asked me like about a month ago, like if you could have, I can't remember the exact hypothetical, but it was something along the lines of Caps win another Stanley Cup or Ovi doesn't break the goal record. I think was
well, you get one or the other.
You get one or the other.
Another Stanley Cup.
You take the Stanley Cup. 100.
Right? I was like, that's the easiest question ever, even though I didn't frame it very correctly here. I wasn't very clear with it, but Caps fans, and I'm sure if you asked Ovi, he wants another Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
Like the goal scoring is great, but you're remembered for how many titles you win.
Yeah,
I understand that there's some immortality also in holding individual records, but in my opinion, team goals and a team winning a title just trounces anything you can do individually in any sport. I don't mean just hockey. I don't mean just with the Caps. That's in any sport. The team titles, those banners hang forever. That's what people aspire to. That's what people like. They go in the arena and they point up to the rafters and show their kids, hey, Caps won a Stanley Cup in 2018. Does anybody go and point, hey, the Caps won the President's Trophy in back whatever year, 2015?
You used to until they got the
well, that was the only thing you had to hang your
hat
on.
President's Trophy guy, but yeah, I guess back in the day before the Cup win, you kind of had to grasp it. Hey, we won the Southeast Division again. Isn't that great?
What was the division before that? What was it called? I can't remember. Like before
the Southeast.
Yeah.
Oh, it was that was like Prince of Wales and Patrick and Norris and I go way back, man. I'm old. I'm old. You got to remember that.
And how lucky are we? Not to turn it negative, but how lucky are we as fans and Ovi's legacy that he did win it in 18? If he had not, and we're sitting in this situation, let's just say they lost that first round to Nashville. Columbus. I always get those two mixed up.
It's all good.
Columbus, and they didn't win the Cup, and we'd still be sitting here in year 18 or whatever with Ovi not getting that Cup. It's an entirely different narrative that we're talking about.
You know what, Stoner? That is an alternate universe that I don't even want to consider.
All right, I don't
even want to live in that sort of sim where the Caps didn't win the Stanley Cup. But I hear you. I can understand, like, Caps fans as a group would be like, Ovi is supposed to be the guy that brought us multiple Stanley Cups. Like, what are we doing here if we hadn't won one by now? So yeah, I mean, I'm just happy and feel lucky that they won one back in 2018. And that honeymoon period is over. We need them to get back on the right track, but that's something you can never take away. And those are memories that we'll always have.
So as far as the right track's concerned, I mean, Ovi still got his goals. You still got, some stud players that are on there, obviously some aging ones. Where do you feel is the disconnect? What happened this season that they just didn't get there?
I think the biggest takeaway is that they're just an old roster. And when guys start getting along in the tooth, you start seeing what's happened to, like, TJ Oshie, for example. I believe he's missed 62 of his last 164 games. And that's what happens with older players. Like, you're going to lose a lot of man games. And then when you're relying on that core and they're missing a lot of time, and you got a coach that's not the biggest fan of playing younger players and assimilating younger players, that's kind of like a deadly cocktail. So they need some younger guys that are down at Hershey, like McMichael and Hendrix LaPierre. Like, those guys need to start coming up to the big club and start making an impact. And I think one other thing that McClellan is going to look at seriously during the offseason is he's going to try to get somebody to take the last 2 years of Kuzi's deal off his hands.
So. Yeah,
I think there's a disconnect there. I know we've heard about trade rumors and the front office being dissatisfied with him. I think if McClellan finds a deal to his liking, even though, look, Kuzi's a mercurial talent, but the goal scoring was down, the production is down. If he can convince somebody to take him off his hands and the 15-ish million that he's owed over his next 2 seasons, I think that's a move that McClellan would seriously consider to try to shake up the DNA of this roster and try to bring in some younger talent, maybe acquire more draft picks. I'm not sure what the return there would be, but I think McClellan, if he finds a taker for Kuzi, that he would seriously consider dealing him.
I know you guys have Coach Laviolette on every week, and he seems like just the greatest dude you want to hang out with. Yep. He knows what he's doing as a head coach. But Todd Reardon got 2 years of first-round playoff exits, and he was gone.
Right.
Laviolette's had 2 years of first-round playoff exits plus a missed playoff season. How is it that it just seems like we're just going to keep going with Laviolette with a worse track record than even Reardon had?
It's a great question, because the whole Laviolette thing before he got here was he's a guy that comes in, assesses the situation, and improves things quickly, and turns things around. And that just hasn't been the case. And look, he's dealing with an older roster. He's dealing with a roster that lost just a lot of guys to injury this season. And but I touched on it earlier. He's not the most willing guy to weave in the younger players, and you need to have that mix between younger players and the veteran core. I think there's only like 6 guys left from the Stanley Cup winning team at this point. They've churned and burned kind of through the roster at this point. It's going to be a tough exit interview for him with Ted Leonsis, because Ted's going to be like, we expected, some deep playoff runs. Hasn't happened. 2 first-round exits and a missed playoffs this year. But we know Ted Leonsis at this point. He's stubbornly loyal. If he feels like Laviolette is the guy and he just hasn't quite gotten the best puck luck and luck with the roster, maybe he feels like we can sign him to a 2-year extension, kind of dovetails with Ovi breaking the goal scoring record. Don't go crazy with a deal, but tack on 2 years. I don't know.
That's rough. Hockey's a lot like soccer and the English Premier League, where you can coaches left and right there when things aren't working out. And that's kind of what Stoner was, talking about, right? These 2 first-round exits. It's no playoffs this time. The graces can only go so far, especially because, as you mentioned, they don't want to go into rebuilding mode with Ovi. So my question, Cakes, is would you give up Ovi to start a full rebuild and let him chase the greatness on another team?
Would I, or would Ted Leonsis?
Would you?
On the spot. He is.
I'm the owner now.
He's feeling it.
You get to make the decision. Are you trading Ovi to rebuild now?
No, I mean that guy he's earned the honor of wearing the Caps sweater his entire career.
I agree.
There's no way I'm trading. There's no way I'm trading away the greatest player, the greatest goal scorer ever, which he already is, because he's doing it in an era
at
where
a much higher cap.
It's tougher to score goals than it was when Wayne Gretzky was doing it. No disrespect to the great one, but I mean the goal scoring back then when he was playing was a joke.
Absurd, yeah.
So yeah, I am not going to have my fan base revolt and trade away the franchise icon when he's within 2 seasons of breaking the all-time goal scoring record. And hopefully McClellan can thread that needle of, you've got the old guys here, but you gotta bring in some younger talent like a Dylan Strome. Find the next Dylan Strome or 2 and bring those guys in. We saw him do it at the trade deadline. I'll give McClellan credit in this. He looked at the roster and said, you know what, fellas, this is just not our year. So he saw the guys that he's not going to re-sign, like Hathaway and Orlov. Bye-bye. You're dealt. Just anybody that had any value. Lars Eller, bye-bye. Pack your bags. You're going to Colorado. Thank you again for the goal, the game-winning goal against the Golden Knights so we could hoist the cup. Thank you for your service, but you have to move on now. McClellan saw that this was a team that, if they even made the playoffs, wasn't going to do any damage. So he got what he could for the valuable pieces that other teams coveted. So I give him credit for that. But he is going to have to rebuild it around Ovi, around Wilson, around what the few remaining years you have left of Backstrom. It was great to see him come back from that hip injury that's so devastating. That was awesome to see. Oshie, I'm worried about. Like, those injuries are just piling up for him. It's hard for him to stay on the ice. And like I mentioned, they need something from the young dudes that they drafted relatively high. McMichael was a first-round pick. He was 25th pick overall, I believe, in 2019. Like, he played 6 games with the big club this year. Yeah. 6! Like that. I mean, how does that happen? Like, if he's not ready by next year, is he ever going to be ready? Like, you need some of that young talent to come in here with the old guard, or else this is a team that's going to be old again and is going to be in danger of missing the playoffs again.
I went back and looked at the Caps record on January 1st. and of this year. I'm not talking about 2018 or anything.
Right.
And this year they had the 5th best record in the East on January 1st. And they finished with the 13th best record or worst record. How do you go in just a couple of months? How does a team go from being in the 5th spot to the 13th spot in just a couple of months?
Yeah, I mean, they just had that red hot December. They were 11-2-2, and then I think they stumbled to like 6-7-1 in January, and they just lost any sort of momentum that they had. And then, like, especially down the stretch, Alex's dad passes away when they really, I mean, they desperately needed him at that point. But I mean, I'm not going to criticize the guy for leaving the team, you know, to go, you know, take care of his family business. Everybody has the right to do that. It's just horrible timing. So yeah, it's just kind of brutal the way it worked out, especially down the stretch. And yeah, it's just no playoffs is it's just a disconnect. Like you said, Stoner, I'm used to Caps playoffs. It's got that rhythm to it. It's every other night. You're watching a game. You know, you're into it.
Going to games.
The Caps community is totally into it. Yeah, it's just a void, man. It sucks.
Yeah, a little listless at this point. So now that the off season's starting, what are some of the things that you want to see? Obviously, it sounds like you want to build again around Auville with some young players. Is there anybody that you want to target either in the draft? Obviously, there's the big name, but 5% chance, as you mentioned, getting there. Is there anybody that you really are looking at to kind of fill the void and help out this Capitals team?
Well, first and foremost, I'm a draft and high pick snob in any sport. That's just like, you need transformational players to help build your roster. If you want to become a championship contender, Stanley Cup winner, or whatever sport, you need to hit on those guys that are high picks. So I'm just gonna be sweating that Connor Bedard, 5% chance at jumping up to get that number 1 pick in a draft, because just related to the Wizards, like I'm over picking between 9 and 12. And I know EB always jumps on me on the show and says, well, you just got to be picked better at between 9 and 12 and you'll be all right. But I'm sorry, your best players aren't sitting there at 9 or 12. Your best players are up in the top 3, top 5 of an NBA draft or an NHL draft. As far as like free agents, that's McClellan's bag. I've not looked at the crop of guys that I would like to come in here, but it's got to be, guys that are like 25 to 28 years old that, like bringing in Connor Brown before he blew his knee out. I'm not sure how old he is, but I think he's relatively young. So. It's just bad luck that, he suffered a torn ACL. Like, that was a guy that they could have used on their offense this year, but he wasn't available. And McClellan knows what he needs. He needs an infusion of youth and talent, whether that's from the AHL squad, from Hershey, or from other teams in free agency. And he's going to stockpile through the draft.
My last question for you, Cakes, Darcy Kemper. I mean, for the most part, I thought he was pretty good. Was he worth the Caps going out and giving a big money deal to in the offseason, knowing that they're tied to him now for a few years, and maybe you can't go get some of those free agents that we were talking about for McClellan to go after?
I think Darcy Kemper was absolutely worth the money that they paid him, because the Caps didn't want to be on the goalie merry-go-round. They didn't want to have a 1A and a 1B. They wanted their top guy that's going to play 60-ish games, and then you have a decent backup that's going to play 20 games. Like, they didn't want the whole deal with, like, who are we going to start tonight? Who's going to have the net tonight? Like, they were out of that business. So I didn't mind McClellan pulling the trigger and spending some of the salary cap on the top free agent goalie that was out there. I just think that's, anybody that questions that at this point is for revisionist history. Like, go look at how incensed the fan base was when they were going back and forth between hold on. The dude who went to Jersey, I've already forgotten his name.
Well, you get Samsonov.
Samsonov went to Toronto. Who's the dog that went to Jersey? His name Vitek. Vitek Vanacek. Like
it's hard to remember those guys.
Yeah, like they're out of sight, out of mind. But I just remember like people were just losing their minds. Or are we going to start Samsonov, or is it going to be Vanacek? Vanacek tonight, Samsonov. Like you can't have like that ping ponging back and forth between two goalies. I just don't think. I don't think most teams that make Stanley Cup runs are, trying to figure out which goalie they're going to play. Like they know who their number one is. And I think McClellan realized we can't have that sort of uncertainty hanging over the roster. We need to have top flight goalie, Kemper's that guy, and just go out and get Chuck Lindgren to back him up. So, I mean, Kemper's here for the long term. Kemper's probably like looking around like, what's going on here? Like I left the Stanley Cup winner. I thought I was going to contend for one here with Alex and company, and it just kind of went sideways. So I think he's the real deal. He held up pretty well, especially with some shoddy defense in front of him at points in the season. So I think Kemper's fine, and I'm at ease with them spending money on him because they needed something more stable at goalie, and they got it with Kemper.
All right, last question for me here for you, Cakes. What's it going to take for the Capitals to hoist the trophy next year? Because this year's done. What's it going to take next year?
So they're going to go from like
missing the playoffs to hoisting the cup. You got Ovi.
It's a good question. One, get Connor Bedard.
All right.
Two,
no problem.
Get a few more scorers on offense to help out Ovi and help out Oshie if he's going to miss a bunch of games. And how about Stromer going for about 75 or 80 points?
Okay.
And dealing with Kuznetsov. That's a lot of things that need to happen.
Yeah. Well, if they could draft Bedard, so you have Connor Bedard, Connor Brown, and Connor. I always get him mixed up with the real good one, McMichael, not McDavid.
You get him mixed up with the superstar Connor.
Yeah, right.
It's not. Unfortunately, that's not our
He's
Connor.
Not coming? Okay.
Now, if you looked at his numbers, see, here was my problem. I fell in love with his numbers I believe it was with the London Knights, correct?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He tore it up.
If you go back and look at his numbers playing for Dale Hunter, his number, like I saw those numbers, I was like, well, if he just gives us like 60 or 70% of that with the Caps, now we're cooking with fire, right?
Yeah.
But he just, for whatever reason,
still waiting.
He's playing more games at Hershey, way more games at Hershey than he is up here in Washington. And look, I want the Hershey Bears to do well. I do, because they're affiliated.
Their championship games don't matter, though.
But I would rather he graduate up with the big boys. I was doing it for the Washington Capitals.
Well, we appreciate you coming from the big boys, the Junkies. This is Cakes from the Junkies. Join us here on Ref the District, breaking down this Cap season that was a little lost on all of us. We'll have to find something to do here in the spring, whether maybe it's just listening more to the Junkies and more to Ref the District. We'll figure it out.
I don't know what I'm going to do over there. Stoner, if you have any ideas, send them my way, my man.
More poker. It just leaves room for more
that
poker.
Ambo going.
More poker.
Until next time.
You're a genius. You're a genius.
Nailed it.
Be a fan.
Here we go.